Tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico.
In a move that has sent shockwaves through North America, Ontario has imposed a 25% tariff on American electricity exports, marking a new phase in the escalating trade war initiated by the Trump administration. On March 4, 2025, President Trump, citing claims that Canada and Mexico had failed to stem the flow of fentanyl into the United States, implemented a 25% tariff on imports from both nations. Simultaneously, a 10% tariff was levied on Canadian energy exports, including oil and natural gas. The stated rationale was to pressure these neighbors into taking stronger measures against illicit drug trafficking, but many analysts argue that the real motive was to force a repatriation of manufacturing and assert U.S. economic dominance. In retaliation, Canada did not sit back. Within hours, the Canadian government announced immediate countermeasures: a 25% tariff on U.S. goods valued at 30 billion Canadian dollars, with plans to extend this to an additional 125 billion Canadian dollars in the near future if the U.S. tariffs persist. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been unequivocal in his stance. These tariffs are unjustified and a direct attack on Canada's economic sovereignty. Trudeau's government has even taken the matter to the World Trade Organization, launching the dispute resolution process to contest what they claim are baseless tariffs. Before we dive deeper into the unfolding implications, if you're finding our analysis insightful and essential for understanding this crisis, please hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe for more expert geopolitical commentary. Your support keeps you informed and helps us continue to deliver timely, in-depth analysis of events that shape our world. The situation escalated further when Ontario's Premier Doug Ford declared that effective Monday, March 10, 2025, Ontario would impose a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the United States. This measure directly affects key U.S. states, Michigan, New York, Minnesota, and others, that rely heavily on Ontario's electricity to power their homes, businesses, and industries. Premier Ford warned that if the U.S. continues with its aggressive tariff policy, Ontario won't hesitate to escalate further measures, even considering shutting off the power supply entirely to American customers. This latest development exposes a critical vulnerability in the U.S. energy and industrial landscape. The tariffs, which were introduced under the guise of protecting American interests, are instead setting off a chain reaction that could lead to significant disruptions in supply chains and energy security. With Canada being the primary supplier of oil, natural gas, and electricity to many parts of the U.S., any interruption, whether partial or complete, could trigger an energy crisis. The cost of energy is already on the rise globally, and any additional shocks from such retaliatory measures would undoubtedly hit American consumers and industries hard. Meanwhile, diplomatic backchannels are buzzing. After intense discussions between President Trump and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, the U.S. announced a one-month pause on the 25% tariffs for most imports from Mexico, effective until April 2, 2025. This move was seen as an acknowledgement of Mexico's efforts to improve its border security and combat illegal immigration and drug trafficking. However, the pause does nothing to ease the pressure on Canada, where the tariff standoff remains unresolved. The economic implications of these actions are enormous. Trump's tariffs were aimed at protecting domestic industries and bringing manufacturing back to the United States, but history and economic theory suggest that such protectionism often results in higher costs for consumers and significant disruptions in global supply chains. In this instance, the imposition of steep tariffs on crucial imports, ranging from energy products to automotive components, is likely to drive up prices, reduce export competitiveness, and slow overall economic growth in the U.S. Canadian industries, by contrast, are now poised to benefit from these retaliatory measures. With a focus on maintaining free and fair trade, Canada is not only defending its economic interests, but also positioning itself as a resilient partner in the global market. As Canadian officials, including outspoken voices like Member of Parliament Charlie Angus, call on citizens to boycott U.S. products, the message is clear. Canada will not be bullied by unilateral U.S. trade policies, and it will use every legal and economic tool at its disposal to safeguard its sovereignty and prosperity. The stakes extend well beyond North American borders. The imposition of these tariffs is a significant departure from decades of free trade policy that has underpinned global economic growth. By moving toward protectionism, the U.S. risks isolating itself from long-standing trading relationships, thereby weakening its geopolitical influence. European nations, which have long enjoyed the benefits of a stable rules-based trading system, are watching closely. There is growing concern that if the U.S. continues down this path, similar retaliatory measures could be adopted against American goods, further fracturing international alliances and cooperation. Moreover, the aggressive tariff strategy has already sparked anxiety in global financial markets. Stock markets have experienced significant volatility in response to the new measures, reflecting uncertainty over the future of U.S. economic policy. Investors are increasingly worried that the tariffs will not only hurt U.S. consumers by driving up prices on everyday items such as automobiles, steel, and energy, but also undermine the broader industrial base that has long been the backbone of the American economy. In response to these challenges, Canada is taking a multi-pronged approach. Beyond imposing tariffs on U.S. goods, Canadian policymakers are exploring additional measures designed to weaken the economic impact of U.S. protectionism. For instance, there are discussions about further restricting exports of oil and electricity to the U.S., thereby creating leverage in negotiations. This strategy is aimed at demonstrating that if the U.S. insists on pursuing its current course, it will suffer real economic consequences, potentially leading to an energy crisis that could cripple key industries and even threaten the stability of U.S. households. The retaliatory measures are not merely about economic numbers, they are about national pride and sovereignty. Canadian leaders have made it unequivocally clear that any suggestion of Canada being absorbed into the U.S., whether as a bargaining chip or through more extreme measures like annexation, will be met with firm resistance. Prime Minister Trudeau's rhetoric, which dismisses U.S. claims and defends Canada's independent economic policy, resonates deeply with Canadians. This national resolve is bolstered by a collective memory of overcoming external pressures through unity and strategic planning. Analysts suggest that the unfolding tariff war could have long-lasting impacts on the global trade order. The U.S., by taking an aggressive and unilateral approach, risks triggering a domino effect that might lead to a more fragmented global economy. Countries like Canada and Mexico, along with European and Asian economies, are now recalibrating their trade strategies to ensure that they are not left at the mercy of an increasingly unpredictable American trade policy. As nations seek to secure their supply chains and diversify their trade relationships, the era of unchallenged U.S. dominance in global markets could be drawing to a close. From a geopolitical standpoint, this conflict is reshaping power dynamics in North America. The U.S. has long relied on the integrated trade networks established under NAFTA and the USMCA, which have facilitated the smooth flow of goods and services across borders. However, the current tariff measures threaten to fracture this carefully balanced system. Canadian and Mexican industries, which have grown accustomed to tariff-free trade, now face the possibility of a major disruption. The potential reorientation of these trade networks toward alternative markets and more diversified partnerships could fundamentally alter the economic landscape of the entire region. The energy sector in particular stands to bear the brunt of this disruption. The United States has traditionally depended on Canadian oil and natural gas to meet its energy demands. With the threat of tariffs on these critical imports, U.S. refineries and power plants could find themselves scrambling to secure alternative supplies. This, in turn, could drive up the cost of energy across the country, with far-reaching consequences for everything from industrial production to household electricity bills. An energy crisis of this magnitude would not only undermine the U.S. economy, but also weaken its geopolitical standing as a leader in innovation and industrial strength. While the Trump administration insists that its tariff policies will revitalize domestic industries and create American jobs, the reality on the ground tells a different story. The disruptions to supply chains, rising production costs, and the potential for an energy crisis all point to a scenario in which the long-term consequences of protectionism could outweigh any short-term gains. The aggressive tariff measures have already sparked protests and condemnation from both domestic critics and international allies, further isolating the U.S. on the global stage. At the same time, Canada's response is proving to be both measured and strategic. By coordinating its actions, imposing counter-tariffs, preparing for energy export restrictions, and pursuing legal challenges, the Canadian government is demonstrating a clear commitment to defending its economic and national interests. The Canadian approach emphasizes resilience, diversification, and the preservation of long-standing trade relationships. This stands in stark contrast to the U.S. policy, which appears increasingly focused on short-term political gains at the expense of long-term stability. In addition to economic and diplomatic measures, Canadian officials are also rallying public support. Calls for boycotts of American products, public demonstrations of national pride, and a unified stance against perceived U.S. overreach are all part of a broader strategy to assert Canada's independence and protect its economic interests. Such mobilization not only bolsters domestic confidence but also sends a powerful message to international markets. Canada is not willing to accept unilateral pressure and will fight back with every tool at its disposal. The implications of this trade war extend well beyond the immediate economic fallout. They touch on the very principles of free trade, economic integration, and international cooperation that have underpinned global prosperity for decades. As the U.S. embarks on a path of aggressive protectionism, it risks setting a dangerous precedent, one that could encourage other nations to adopt similarly unilateral measures, ultimately leading to a more fragmented and less predictable global economy. In the long run, the retaliatory measures taken by Canada and other trading partners could force the United States to reconsider its current policy trajectory. If the economic pain inflicted by these tariffs grows too severe, there may come a point when American businesses, consumers, and even political leaders begin to push back against the administration's isolationist tendencies. However, for now, the U.S. appears committed to its strategy, even as mounting evidence suggests that it may be sowing the seeds of its own economic decline. In summary, the imposition of tariffs by the Trump administration has set off a chain reaction that is rapidly transforming the trade landscape in North America. Ontario's decision to apply a 25% tariff on electricity exports is just the latest and one of the most consequential measures in a series of retaliatory actions designed to protect Canadian economic sovereignty. As Canada mobilizes both economic and diplomatic tools to counter U.S. aggression, the long-term effects of this trade war could be profound. Higher energy costs, disrupted supply chains, and a significant erosion of American industrial competitiveness. For the United States, the consequences are clear. The aggressive tariff strategy may yield some short-term political victories, but it comes at the cost of undermining the very economic foundations upon which the country has built its global leadership. Meanwhile, Canada and other affected nations are poised to emerge stronger, leveraging their natural resources, diversified trade networks, and unwavering commitment to free trade as they navigate this turbulent period. The message is clear. Unilateral aggression in trade is not only outdated, it is counterproductive. As Canada and other nations mobilize to secure their economic futures, the United States faces a pivotal choice. continue down the path of isolationism and risk its own economic collapse, or engage in constructive dialogue and embrace the benefits of mutual cooperation and free trade. The world is watching, and the consequences of this decision will be felt for generations. Thank you for joining us in this detailed analysis. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to stay informed as we follow this critical chapter in global economic history.